There was a study done of 5 and 6-year-old children where they were asked, would you like to try something really challenging? The only thing is, you've got to be really, really smart to be able to do it. At age 5, both boys and girls say, yes, I'll do it, I'll give it a go. But by age 6, the girls have started saying no. So, what is it that's making girls start to think, am I just not really, really smart? Or is there something about the risk involved? But now, look, that study doesn't know. We never got to find out why that is. And let's face it, that is true for a lot of what we know in psychology. What we have is theories and evidence for and against. And maybe that's why when we heard something called imposter syndrome, that got latched onto. Now, there was an original study that found patterns in high performing people, especially women, that found that there was this sense of perfectionism, wanting to do everything right, and then not feeling good enough or not feeling ready to take that next step. But I'm here to tell you that imposter syndrome, it isn't a thing. That sounds really medicalized and it sounds like we have nothing to do with that. But actually, it is much more in control than we realize. Now, why do we see it as a syndrome? Well, is it helpful sometimes to understand things that a lot of us experience in a similar way, but it's never exactly the same. That's what we've got to understand. What is the same is the fact that it comes from thought. And I want to help people understand what I call the human operating system, to understand thought and actually where self-doubt comes from, which is what imposter syndrome is. Ultimately, it's self-doubt, and to help people live more peaceful and happier lives. Now, when we start to look at it as syndrome, we start looking at the syndrome and behaviors, and we're trying to use our analytical mind to think, why is it like that? But going through that approach is a bit like having a leak in the roof and focusing all your attention on the bucket. And is it the right bucket? And what do we do about the bucket? And it's not going to the source of the issue. That's what I'm here to help you learn through the human operating system. So, the first thing that I want to bring your attention to is that we have a life force in us that's keeping us alive. And it helps us psychologically. We have this psychological immune system, and it gives us ideas of what to do. It's trying to keep us alive and keep us well in the world. And here's a prime example. So, age 21, my youngest sister, she was working for a company, and she was working in London in Paddington Station. And they worked in a townhouse. There were 4 of them, and so townhouse is split over 3 levels. And there were just 4 of them in a team, small team. And her boss, who was much older than her, nearly 60, had been having some fainting spells. So they knew there was something going on. So one day, her boss was walking towards her, and she just collapsed and grabbed the desk. Of course, my sister, she jumped up and started to tap her boss and say, "Are you okay, Anne? Are you okay?" And quickly she could see that she was not being very responsive. So she shouted to her friend in the next room, "Call an ambulance." And her friend got on the phone, her other colleague, she was tapping her, and the friend brought the phone, and they started to talk about what it was. So my sister's got no medical training at this point, anything else. She's just listening to the paramedics to say, is she being responsive? And my sister says, no, she's not. Is she breathing? She said, I don't know, her mouth's shut. And they said, open her mouth. And she said, I can't, it's jammed shut. And that they just said, you've got to force it open. So she was there trying to force it open, just focusing on the task at hand. And they said, you need to breathe 2 deep breaths into her. You need to do chest compressions. She started to do that, of course, full of fear, but just doing what she was told. And luckily, because they lived near a station, because the office was near a station, the paramedics got there quickly, and they managed to save her life. Now, my sister, of course, afterwards was, then the emotion hit her, the shock of what had happened. But Anne ended up living for another year after that before she had another fatal heart attack, which eventually led to her passing, sadly. But of course, her and her friends and family were just so grateful for that extra year. Now, what is it that means that someone can be in that life and death situation and actually save someone's life? Again, come back to this thing about life force, that there is something that is driving us, the same thing that makes all the plants grow, that we don't know and we don't fully understand, but there's something in us that's helping us, that we can trust and rely on. And it shows up for us as wisdom or intuition, but we get disconnected from it in the world that we live in because we just don't focus on that much. So anyway, life force is something that we can really focus on. And when it comes to self-doubt, we can help rely on that more to overcome different aspects of self-doubt. So the second principle I want to tell you about is thought. We have a creative energy that runs through us humans, in the form of thought. So it's just think of it as an energy that comes, that's constantly, we know that thoughts, when we look at brain scans, they're pieces of energy, basically. They're electrical currents. Now we experience them as thoughts and beliefs, and what will happen when, and what happened last week, and is that good or bad? And when that creative energy is put externally, creatively, it's really good and helpful and it feels great. But when it's focused inwards, then it often is rumination and it's risk, and it feels quite destructive. So let me tell you, but just bring this to life. Imagine there are two elephants wearing pink tutus next to me dancing. Can anyone visualize that right now? So that just shows you that as soon as we have a thought, we're experiencing it in the world. You know, it's just like when we read a book, we're in that world, we're actually living it, we're creating that in our mind. And that is a creative power, which again, we just have to understand how it works. Now, when it comes to self-doubt, what's happening is it's creating these worlds, catastrophizing, all to protect us. You know, we have this strong desire to live as well, and the power of thought creates an event that helps us to see potential risks. But if we misuse that and we don't understand it, then actually it creates a lot more fear, and then the fear holds us back and keeps us stuck, but it never has to. The third aspect of the human operating system that I want to tell you about is awareness. So thoughts are not necessarily within our control. That's just energy, and that's why they're always changing. But the awareness is something we do have control over. So imagine if you've ever been to the theatre, that there's a spotlight and it's following like the main person on the stage. That's a bit like our attention. And what we can do, we are actually the person holding that spotlight, if you like, and we can shift it off that thought. So if there's a thought that's particularly kind of worrying for us, we can actually shift that spotlight away and get back to feeling good. Now, this all might sound simple, and you might think, well, what does it have to do with imposter syndrome? But actually, when we understand just the way things work, we're not necessarily here to eliminate all the thoughts, but we know which ones to trust and which ones not to, and to trust them whether or not what kind of mood that we're in as well. So let me start to say, what I hope you're starting to see is that we have this creative power. We've got a different way of seeing how our mind works, where we don't have to strain and struggle, where we've got a lot of good things that we can rely on, and we have a lot of ways of just understanding the system that helps us to feel better. I've got a book, it explains it in a lot more detail, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, and I coach people all over the world, me with a team of 10 coaches in my business, which is Business Reimagined. So if any of this is starting to resonate with you, then I really encourage you to get in touch, because we can work with people one-on-one, and companies will often sponsor people for this type of work, because this deep inner work, when you have a clear mind, you're much better at being creative, at getting your work done, being focused, and having great relationships. All the things that help companies be excellent come more naturally when we have a clear mind. So we're not trying to get rid of any negative feelings. As I said, I just want you to remember this human operating system. I want you to start to know that there is more peace. It's ready to be accessed. It's in you, exactly. All you have to do is start to see it, but you know, you really don't have to do that much effort in to get it working right. So as I say, if anything resonates with you, then please give me a call, because any of the self-doubt we have, it's a bit like a monster under the bed. You know, they're just things that come to scare us. They're parts of our imagination. Now, when it comes to children, we can say to them, no, there's nothing under the bed, because we know. But when it comes to regular adult self-doubt, we believe it, and that's where the problem comes from. So thank you so much for listening. Drop me a comment if any of this resonates, or like I say, DM me, and I will put my details in the comments below. Thanks so much, everyone.